Before my wife and I had kids, one of the things that we regularly did on our Sabbath was go for a hike. And we lived in Pasadena. There's a hike nearby in Altadena up Echo Mountain. It's about 3 miles up, and we'd usually take some water, some snacks, and it was kind of a time to unpack our week and pray. Sometimes I didn't want to hike. I wanted to sleep, or I wanted to binge watch some show. And yet I knew the harder the week, the more I needed that time. After Paul's ministry in Philippi, he and his partners took a hike of sorts. I'm guessing it gave them some time to reflect and to gain perspective. No doubt it was a time for them to pray. But I'm also guessing it was a little less enjoyable than the short jaunts up the mountain that used to accompany my Sabbaths. Luke tells us when Paul and his companions had passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where there was a Jewish synagogue. That's simple enough, right? Yes and no. At times I feel like we need a map to read scripture. And that was a 100-mile hike. Now, how did Paul do it? How did he continue to persevere through persecution and hardship, not to mention the physical challenges of day-to-day ministry life? He comments on it in 1 Thessalonians 2. You yourselves know, brothers and sisters, that our coming to you was not in vain. But though we had already suffered and had been shamefully mistreated at Philippi, as you know, we had courage in our God to declare to you the gospel of God in spite of great opposition. In other words, they showed up in Thessalonica and experienced more of the same. An initially receptive welcome in the synagogue, only later staring down an angry mob once again. How do you keep going? And Paul tells us their courage, their capacity to persevere didn't come from themselves. It came from God. Their courage was found in him, and he sustained them. So much so that they were able to work night and day. So as Paul says, that we might not burden any of you while we proclaim the gospel, proclaim to you the gospel of God. Jumping to Paul's letter to the Thessalonians is getting a bit of ahead of ourselves. In Acts 17:2, we're told Paul went in, as was his custom, and on 3 Sabbath days argued with them from the scriptures, explaining and proving that it was necessary for the Messiah to suffer and to rise from the dead, and saying, "This is the Messiah Jesus whom I'm proclaiming to you." Some of them were persuaded and joined Paul and Silas, as did a great many of the devout Greeks and not a few of the leading women. I think you and I could take a page from Paul's book. For 3 consecutive Sabbaths, what was it that he focused on? Did he lament and complain of some hot-button cultural issues? Did he discuss the need for regime change in Jerusalem or Rome? No. As a Christ follower, he focused his attention and proclamation on Christ. He proclaimed Jesus dying and rising again, as he suggests in 1 Corinthians 2, "For I resolved to know nothing while I was with you except Jesus Christ and him crucified." Paul didn't have any problem keeping the main thing the main thing. The crucified Jesus is our risen Messiah and Lord. If you're going to disagree with Paul, at least for his part, it's going to be about Jesus and his lordship, not some opinion on a secondary thing. I even appreciate the language he uses. The word argue in verse 2 isn't the kind of thing my kids do when they want the same toy. It's what a lawyer does in thoughtfully laying out their case. The word is also used for discourse, discussion, and negotiation. And Paul's not red-faced and screaming or gaslighting. He's thoughtfully engaging in a manner that he describes in Thessalonians 2 as pure, upright, and blameless. So there's the challenge. As witnesses, we've got to keep Christ at the center and keep calm as we do so. making sure that our role as messenger doesn't make it impossible to hear and accept the message. Blessings, church. Have a great week.